Hey over there, you're welcome to Living a Full Life Forum. This is Dr. Violet Kayom. Today we are going to look at a very important topic as it's going to show us how we can protect the generations after us from acquiring the excess baggages we have suffered with, in terms of the early traumas we have experienced. And so the topic for today is parenting styles in the setting of early trauma. How we can parent and how we can do it a good way even when we have experienced early trauma. You see, our adult life is a clear reflection of how our childhood was. Many times in life, we are not handed a manual, a parenting manual, or an instruction guideline to teach us how to bring up our children and the children, that we have acquired along the way, in the path of life. And so you find that we have to pick from the bits and pieces we've learned from as we grow up. And of course, the type of attachment and bonding we form with our earliest caregivers is what really shows us, gives us a lens through which we view life. And so we view ourselves, we view the people around us and the entire world by the experiences we have gone through as we grew up. Unfortunately, many times these experiences have not been the best. We haven't had maybe those very nurturing, environments. We have not been taught how to process our emotions. We've not been taught many things. Of course, we cannot blame our parents because they did the best they could. Most of them actually tried, and they were also picking from what they learned. So meaning we carried whatever we learned, and they also carried whatever they learned. Now, what we don't want is a situation where there's transgenerational trauma, where one generation, packages trauma and then hands it over to the next generation. Then it also does a similar job and hands over. There has to be a point where trauma has to be cut, there has to be a severing so that the next generations grow more healthy, than the previous generations. And so that is why it's important for us to be very intentional about our parenting styles. Just like we've seen in the previous videos, when we experience childhood trauma, repeated, situations that are difficult, where your emotions were not processed, where you suffered possibly sexual violence, or you are mistreated and not emotionally, supported. So you find that there are parts of our brains that end up being immensely affected. So we end up being in a high alert mode all the time, survival mode, because that is the mode that works when there is a lot of trauma going on. So there are parts of our brains that become distorted in terms of the nerve fibers. And now those parts of the brain end up putting false alarms always that, there's danger, and the stress hormones keep being released. So even when there is no danger, as an adult, you keep drawing from those childhood wounds you've experienced. And so you end up finding that your emotions end up being erratic and you're not able to parent effectively. This also affects the higher parts of our brain, the part of our brain, the cortical, part of our brain that is responsible for reasoning, for sound judgment, for logical, explanations of our situations. So when we are constantly in this primitive mode because of the unhealed wounds, find that those areas which are supposed to think logically end up being suppressed. So that part of the brain ends up shrinking a lot. Okay, so that means that as we have children, as we bring them up, we may end up passing on the trauma we've experienced even when we do not know it or even when we didn't desire, to do that. So that is why it's important from today on for us to be very mindful how we are parenting. And many times we learn from what we have observed, how we have been treated, and that is exactly how we carry it on to our present reality. So let us be mindful of that, even as we now go through some of the effects of early trauma on parenting. Okay, so parents who have faced a lot of traumatic, exposures as they grew up, number one, they end up having emotional dysregulation. They have erratic emotions. And this comes from the fact that while they were young, they were treated maybe unjustly, maybe they had to suppress a lot of their emotions, and they didn't know, how to go about their emotions. And because of that, they end up channeling it, in erratic ways. For instance, me growing up from a polygamous family, like I've said before, that is really a dysfunctional family where there's a lot of strife, a lot of violence, and you don't seem to have someone to really support you emotionally, because everyone is battling their own emotions. There is chaos, all the time. So you end up having your own defense and coping mechanisms. And part of this is suppressing your emotions very much, and then putting these high guards around you to protect you from any pain. So anytime someone did to me something that looked at whatever I experienced when I was young, trying to take me for granted, trying to to control me, I always rose up and hit the roof. So I had a lot of anger, and I brought all that into my parenting style. So you end up having that you have a low tolerance for stress, because we have not been taught, how to manage our emotions. So the stress, you're easily agitated, you're easily put on the edge, and before long you find that even the normal childhood experiences, children are not like adults. They have weird behaviors, and it's just because they're yet growing up. So you easily get irritated by the normal childhood, behaviors. You end up interpreting it that either you're not a good enough parent, or your children are overly indisciplined. So you put a lot of pressure on them. And then because now you have not been taught how to soothe yourself. There's a mechanism as you grow up. We are supposed to learn self-soothing, that when situations are not going our way, when life is very difficult, when we are faced with very, difficult decisions to make, or turmoil all around us, we are supposed to have a level of self-soothing such that, you calm down yourself. Now, when you have had a very difficult background, you find that you have not been taught that. Your brain is not wired that way. So anything that comes just puts you off. Before you know it, you're very erratic. You are shouting all over the place. You're exploding. You are very anxious, very fearful. Things just tip you over. Now, in that situation, you cannot do the co-regulating you should be doing for your children. In our family setup, there are all kinds of emotions that go on. I just remember a few days ago, we woke up and then somehow we delayed in the house, and so we were getting late to get to school. And so everyone was agitated. I realized everyone was shouting. I was shouting, the children were shouting, everyone was looking for the shoe that is lost, and I'm shouting, why did you get the shoe yesterday? So there was all this chaos, and I had to calm myself down and realize that, what? we have to have a better way. Otherwise, we are going to mess it up altogether. And so one of the children was really ranting on and on. She was very moody and shouting this way and there. And I told her, what, just relax. That math, I knew it was the math subject that was giving her, all, this dysregulation she was experiencing. I told her that, what, that math will be okay. And then for your thing, just pack whatever you can. Let us just get going. Because either way, we're already late. And so over time, I've learned that when you self-soothe, then you can co-regulate your children's emotions. You can be able to calm down and talk to them in a calming tone. You can be able to speak the right language. You can do the right bodily, interaction that will calm them down. And that is very important for children, because children don't know how to process emotions, and it will strain them a lot more than the adults. Okay, so emotional dysregulation is one of the things that parents who have faced a lot of emotional trauma end up displaying. So it is something that we have to work on. The second thing is parents who have faced a lot of early trauma can end up being over-controlling. Because when you are young, you find that you did not have your way. Things were done and you did not have control, Maybe you are mistreated the other way, you are shunned, your emotions were not supported, you were treated violently, so you are not in charge. As you grow up, you want to be in control of everything. So you want to control every situation, you control everyone around you. Now, human beings are not created to be controlled and manipulated. A human being will always rebel against something that wants to dominate them. So you end up trying to dominate your children, and your children end up becoming rebellious. Either they will be rebellious, or the other category will tip over into, inability to be independent. They just fail to know how to manage their environment just because of your excessively controlling behaviors. So that is the second issue that parents who have faced trauma, end up bringing in their parenting style. The other one is a certain category end up being overly permissive. One group is very controlling of their children, the other ones are overly permissive. They're like, well, I was mistreated when I was young, I wasn't given this and that, so let me allow my children to enjoy. Now, in allowing your children to enjoy, you may end up not creating clear boundaries for them. The children behave anyhow. You do not want to be tough on them. You don't want to set any rules because you want them to enjoy life, the life that you missed. Now, that is also very wrong because children have to grow within a clear boundary. They feel safe when there are rules and regulations. It shouldn't be like a very firm, tough hand, but also it shouldn't be a loose end that they're allowed to do whatever. They have to be controlled. Okay, so some parents end up being overly permissive, and these children become very notorious, very disrespectful, and then they end up not really making it much in life. The other set of parents become emotionally detached to their children because they did not experience much of the support they needed in terms of their emotions. They end up not taking care of the emotions of their children. So my children who are angry maybe that morning and very irritable, if I hadn't yet healed, I would end up just shutting, away, or dominating them and just ignoring their emotions. But we have to learn to assess the children's emotion and help them acknowledge that whatever they're experiencing is normal, but they have to channel it the right way. So emotional detachment from our children does not help the children learn how to process their own emotions, and it may tip them over into these same problems that we experience or we are struggling with. Other people end up having a lot of self-doubt, shame in their parenting styles, the difficulty, self-soothing we've talked about. Then others tip into a lot of violence, so they want to be in control. There are some parents who they do not want any nonsense. It's like they consider the whinings and whimpings of the children as nonsense, so they just shout, they raise their voice and suppress everyone. Now, just because you've raised your voice and everyone is now quiet doesn't mean that they're on your page, and doesn't mean that they will stick with you long enough. Before long, you realize that these are the same children who go and do their own things. They try out, substance abuse, and they join the wrong groups just because you are not there for them, and you're just putting your dominance, over them. No one wants to be controlled. Yes, so those are some of the issues, the effects of early trauma on parenting, on our parenting style. So many we have to learn to deal with them. Just a few things that we now need to do to improve our parenting. Number one, let's always go back into our past. Let's identify those areas where we were traumatized and do some of the exercises you've talked about in the previous videos, okay? How to overcome emotional trauma. Number one, that autobiography that you need to write about your life's history. The things that involve a lot of painful memories, the shame, the anger, the bitterness, the strife that comes when you remember those instances. It's good that you write them down and relieve them and let go. Writing the letters to the people who have hurt you, even though you may not deliver those letters, all that helps you to bring all the painful experiences you had in your subconscious that were buried there. You bring them into your conscious mind, and then you start letting them go, because the wound has to be healed. And as you do that, you are reducing the grip it has on you. You're breaking that chain. You're blunting out that cutting edge of the painful memories. And then before long, you realize that you are up and above, on top of those traumatic experiences. And so it suppresses those primitive responses you have that bring the surge of negative emotions, and then it makes the high order part of your brain, the cortex, start working right. You end up having sound reasoning, judgment when faced with a stress situation. Number two, you're going to start mapping out the issues as regards your parenting. Are you the one who is always emotionally dysregulated, very angry, erratic in your emotions? Are you the controlling type? Are you the one who is overly permissive? Are you the one who has emotional detachment, who battles with shame and feelings of inadequacy in parenting? So map out those areas and now start intentionally working on them. Okay, start intentionally working on them and trying to rebuild your relationship with your child. Okay, so rebuilding the relationship with your child is the third step. So you've mapped out your parenting style, you've found those areas, and start working on them. Where you feel emotionally dysregulated, learn to breathe in and out and start challenging those negative emotions. Don't allow to flow with them. When you feel overly controlling, start allowing your children some degree of independence. If you're overly permissive, start creating boundaries for your children, putting some rules so they can live in a safe environment. Where you're emotionally detached, so now start, taking time to listen to your child's emotions and processing with them and helping them come out of whatever it is that is oppressing them and stressing them at that time. Okay, so you need to intentionally start rebuilding your relationship with your child. It's never too late. Even when they are grown up, you can always do something. There's always something to be done, and they will remember you for that. Of course, you may join some support groups. There are some support groups, parent groups. Join the parenting seminars. There are a lot happening. We'll soon be having some here with Living a Full Life Forum. It's important to be part of groups where we can learn, the new things. Because many times we grew up knowing that this is the way things are to be done, but we realize that life is not like that. This generation of children we are having is different from how we were. So we cannot take it that, the way we were brought up is exactly how they should be brought up. So there are many things that we have to unlearn and then relearn new things. So reading, about parenting styles and parenting challenges, reading materials, reading on the internet, books, attending seminars, conferences are very important. And then, of course, you can reach out to us at Living a Full Life Forum. We are always available to support you. We don't want you to walk the journey by yourself. We want to help. And we've had a number of families approaching us and children coming, and we are seeing a lot of improvement in relationships between parents and children becoming more and more confident and full of life again, even where they thought they had given up. And honestly, I can tell you there are many of our children who are suffering a lot. They are taking drugs, they have joined, bad peer groups right under our noses, and we don't know it. And some of them confide in us, and we realize that really there are many things that we have really left just to fate, as regards the upbringing of our children. So let's be very intentional in parenting. Let's remember that as you heal and become better, you are cutting the transgenerational trauma that would end up affecting your children, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren. And we are all going to make the world a better place to live in. Please keep with us and watch out for the next videos, and have a blessed time.